instead of relying on scientific research to do anything, many of them visit witch doctors. Even for things that can be done through scientific polling. Even right now, many of them are going to see witch doctors to see whether they will win the election. Something you can do through a scientific polling. But that's where we are. That's where we are. That's where we are, but for many reasons that we've landed there. But there is need to think about how to get out of this. Because unless we do so, then we shall continue having these particular challenges. And the second thing really to mention, and I'm mentioning this first point here, that the government has neglected research and neglected evidence-led policy making. And we are not alone. When I look at Uganda, which I'm very familiar with, and the Makerere University, for the time I've been an external examiner there and doing other consultancies to make ends meet there, I can tell much more. I can tell more about Uganda's policy making process. It's more laughable than ours. Now, there is another problem other than the government neglecting universities and the role they play in knowledge making. The models that they use for funding universities, regrettably, it's a model that is not based on any research. It's a model that focuses on undergraduate students when the entire world has moved to graduate training for manpower development. I studied in the Scandinavian countries for my PhD, and all along, I thought they had undergraduate students, and so I used to ask, when is the graduation for first degree? And I was told there's no first degree. Everybody moves to a master's degree. I mean, that's a sorry state of affairs, except that some countries now are, like Denmark, are considering to award first degrees, but everybody gets a master's degree. That's the move. That's where the countries are moving many instances. Even the numbers of graduate students has been on increase. At my own university, where I teach at the University of Nairobi, it has been our quest to improve the numbers of graduate students to even a half of the undergraduate students. But then the thinking of the government is that that should not be the case. We should be funded on basis of undergraduate students. Which government is thinking about 21st century manpower production and productivity and the growth on relying on undergraduate studies in this 21st century? It means we have lost it as a government. We have lost it as a country. The government would be emphasizing on increasing the number of graduate students, including doubling the number of masters. Make them even 70% if possible of undergraduate programs, students, because that's where the future is. The future is in graduate studies because that's where knowledge production actually begins. Undergraduates give you the knowledge, give you the necessary skills to retool the world, but not to transform the world. Transformation begins by changing that knowledge that you acquire and making it important for education and for the future. I think when we look at it this way, then, we can say there is a need for us to start thinking about how we need to put our houses in order. And the most important thing to start doing is to start seeing how best we can start influencing policy thinking and political thinking. Now that we know that everything is politicized, there must be a way of thinking, there must be a way of approaching policymakers, including those who don't like research, and ask them at least to start thinking about research in addition to thinking about witchcraft if they can. Mix them. At least we have a role to play in research. But we must also, as universities, start having internal reflections. I don't think we are doing very well as scholars. Because even if we were to do the Google citations and look at where Kenyan scholars are, yes, we are topping ourselves, we top in many respects in Africa, but we should not be comparing ourselves with Africa. We should be comparing ourselves with the right countries. We should be comparing ourselves with Southeastern Asian countries who were performing under us. We outperformed them in all skills in education not more than 20 years ago. We were beating all of them, including in publications. Now they are producing more than we are. My colleagues would remember at the University of Nairobi the struggle we have had to tell colleagues that let's do peer review publications, and people fighting it. We need to reclaim the space as Kenyan scholars and start publishing in high impact spaces and in high impact journals for that visibility to be seen, for that visibility, because the future of the world and research grants is about publications. We are not doing well. And we are not doing well not because of many other reasons, but simply because even the mentorship that we should be having within our own corridors has disappeared. But there is also another crisis. And I must admit that this is a serious crisis. And a majority of us have contributed to this crisis. This is the crisis that I call the crisis of two universities in one, where we have an administrative university and the academic university. The administrative university is the most powerful university, but it comprises people who have never been to the university. And they are joined by those who have been to the university but would like to also be powerful. The academy itself does not, the academy in terms of scholars do not have even office spaces. But there's no single administrator in the university, in the administrative university, without an office that glitters. And if you want to know the difference, check what time people report to office. Administrative universities leave at 5 on the dot, unless there is overtime to be paid. Trust me, unless there is overtime to be paid, they will not come, they will not stay there beyond 5 o'clock. And the academia sleeps in the office. When you have an idea and it has come at the right time, you don't go home. That's the truth. But this particular challenge of administrative and academic university has continued to deepen. And because the administrative university has no idea about what the purpose of a university is, they have continued to staff universities with employment figures. There are some universities seated here, and I've got the data. If you force me, I can reveal it, where the ratio of a teaching staff to non-teaching staff is 1:7. 1:9 in 2 universities, 1:9 in 2 universities, 1:7 in 5 universities, 1:3 among the big ones, and 1:2.5 among the top 2 or top 3 universities. So are we really talking about a university that will be producing knowledge, or we sit at university as an employment bureau? So these are internal reflections that are actually eating even on the finances that we have as a university. Instead of thinking about putting money aside for research, you are putting money aside for employment of children of politicians and our own children at the universities. That's the truth of the matter. If you push me to shove, you push me to the wall, don't try, because I'll do it. Push me and I give the figures and they shock you. Don't ask me how I got the figures. These are some of the things that are worrying. We must deal with the administrative university because it does not live for the benefit of the university. It is not for the benefit of the academy, and that's where we lost it. And if you want to know the origins of this, it doesn't date back many years ago. In Kenya, it doesn't date back many years ago. It started actually with the duty-free cars. When the administrative university thought they should have also cars, they started saying there's someone called professor equivalent. That's where the origins of professor equivalent, assistant lecturer equivalent, and everything equivalent, that's where it emerged from. And therefore, every university copied that even if you have never passed an exam and you have become an accountant, then you are a professor equivalent. I think really it's to abuse the university knowledge-making space to think that you can call someone a professor equivalent and you put it in a document and rush it to National Treasury and the National Treasury accepts it, there's something wrong then with our society. Now, let me quickly try to see how these problems can sorted out. Jeff, I'm finalizing very quickly. First of all, we must deal with the actual recognition that universities are a public good. There's no doubt about that. The debts that have been accumulated have not been accumulated because universities make losses. We don't produce anything for sale. But if universities are pushed to sell their products, it will become very expensive to train manpower. If universities are required to make profits, we can charge degrees at market rates. We can charge degrees at market rates, meaning that we shall create opportunities for higher inequalities in the society, because it's your children who will go to the university. And me, I'm poor, at least my children, I will suffer the consequence. So unless the government recognizes the university as producers of public good and providers of public good, and take the debts that are there, you don't have to build Uchumi supermarket, build Kenya Airways, and any other parastatal that goes wrong for wrong reasons, and then you say universities have got debts. These debts have been produced, these debts are the result of providing public good. I know, yes, there is mismanagement, but in some instances, but please, education cannot be quantified in the manner that we are being forced to quantify it. The government must come and take over the responsibility of taking over those particular debts. And then we start looking at how best can we move forward with all those debts. But moving forward, then there must be restructuring. There's no point of having a university with a ratio of 1 teaching staff to 7 or 9 non-teaching staff members. International ratio is 1 teaching staff to 0.5 administrative staff. Not the other way around. Check figures right. Google right now. Check. There are some universities that have got 1 to 2, but that's where the crisis is. Those are the countries in Southeast Asia and some in America, but for different reasons. These are issues that we must revisit. These are issues we must revisit and say that we need to make universities a place for making knowledge and a place for research. And there is no other way other than trying to make universities have teaching staff that are happy, incentivized, and producing for national development as much as possible, and producing knowledge that is relevant also. But by the way, Mulinga, this debate about science and arts, I've come increasingly to realize that I think those involved in that debate have never gone to the university. Yeah, because we say all knowledge is relevant. And that's why many universities today are beginning any course with the philosophy of that particular discipline. There's philosophy of chemistry, philosophy of physics, and now some of them are introducing history of chemistry, history of physics, and I'm serious, because they want students in chemistry and physics to have a very good grounding. So when you come and start saying history is not as good as chemistry, my friend, I think we must look at what you scored at the university. But that's with a light touch, but I'm serious about really not trying to make distinctions in the way we do it. The third thing I would like to emphasize here, we must find ways of incentivizing researchers. In many, many universities, researchers are actually given monetary rewards on basis of the publications that they have every year. If I'm not wrong, South Africa, I think, gives a token of appreciation of not less than $5,000. Is it for every journal article produced in high impact? I can't remember. But there is something close to that, depending on where you are published. And that money goes to you and to the department. You share with the department. And you can see the competition, the competitive mood of producing in high impact journals. And I'm being told to wide up. The third thing to do is to think about public procurement process in this country. If you look at countries that actually value universities, you cannot have infrastructure projects that are not informed, whose design, whose activities are not part of the university thinking process. Instead, what we have is China everywhere. The contractors, many universities get intertwined with the contracting process. So that if it's wrongs that are being done, they are tied with the Moi University Engineering Department, University of Nairobi Civil Engineering Department, Electrical Engineering Department. They are part and parcel of national development enterprise. And that's how universities make their money. The last thing is, I think, the commercialization of our own assets, our intellectual property rights that we have. Commercializing them is highly bureaucratic process. Very highly bureaucratic, and yet that's where money in terms of billions is. But the reason why universities have not been able to move that direction is simply because the government also makes it extremely difficult to have outfits that can lead to commercialization of some of these particular products, knowledge products that we have in our universities. But there must be a way out. There's no university that has not produced something innovative in the last 5 years. If it was the private sector, that would be fetching billions of shillings today. We must start thinking about how to relate and have relationship with the private sector, hand over some of these things so that at least we start benefiting from our own work, and so that the researchers can become rich. Most of the researchers produce materials that would be making them billions of shillings, but because we do not give them incentives to commercialize them, some die poor, and yet they are keeping billions of shillings under the shelves of the offices. Let me stop there, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much, Professor Kaninga. When you see pattern, you see it just happens. You don't. Yeah. So we'll transition next to a very important presentation that brought us. I think that sets the tone that we have to reform and we have to get better. We are all struggling in many ways, but the avenues of improving and getting better are there. The indicators of where we need to improve are actually obvious. So it's the boldness and the courage to take the action. So I'll invite one of our key partners for this event, who is the CEO of the University Funding Board, to take us through, okay, practically speaking, what are we talking about in the coming 1 to 3 years? Now, the presentation. And once the CEO has finished, we'll invite Professor Kaninga and the CEO here, and we will ask questions. We will interact. And that will bring us to a closure, and we celebrate what we're going to do beyond here.
Thank you, Dr. Mwansa, and good afternoon all. I hope that this is the worst time to interact with people, especially after lunch, and especially after a very powerful presentation by Professor Kaninga, who has actually made us think. For me, he has taken me through a journey which I need to really think about how we shall continue to engage. Thank you, Prof, for this presentation. I know even the notice for presenting was quite short, but you have really assisted us. Now, I'll be brief. My name is Geoffrey Monari. I am the first CEO, substantive CEO of University Funding Board. This board was established by the Universities Act of 2012. It is now being operationalized. So since 2012, in the year 2017-2018, it set up the first DUC, that is the differentiated unit costs, and that has been the journey. I'll be able to take you through this journey as we move ahead. So the outline of my presentation will be the mandate of the Universities Fund, because I realize many of us do not know the mandate and the functions of the fund, the university's funding status currently and the current funding model, the challenges, which I will not dwell upon so much because Professor Kanyinga has actually done a wonderful job towards that. And then we can now talk about the future. Most of what I'll be discussing is just to lay a foundation. So we actually currently give grants to government-sponsored students both in public and private universities. Therefore, what the Universities Fund is actually supposed to do, and that is where to date when I hear universities talking about capitation, to me, capitation ended when the DUC was implemented because money is supposed to follow a student. Because every year we have a formula. That's why we keep on asking for the number of students you have. Then we calculate based on the formula that was approved by the Vice Chancellor's committee. And then we give you and allocate you a budget. But to date, change is also difficult. We still talk about government capitation because it's paid by the Ministry of Education on a monthly basis. But ideally, what is happening is that we are funding you based on the differentiated unit costs. And I think the private universities are the ones that have caught up the concept very well because they understand that we are actually giving money to the student and not the university. And once we start looking at the concept in that way, then we start appreciating the differentiated unit costs. So from that slide, you can actually see the university, some of the universities that we support. And the vision of the fund is to be a valued fund for the university. So what are our functions? Just speaking direct from what the Act says, that is the Universities Act, Section 53. It says, number one is to provide funds for sustainable financing to universities in Kenya. Number two, mobilize funds for the purpose of financing universities from the government, donors, and from any other source. And that is the core. If we do not provide funds, then there's no use of having a universities fund. We're going to sit and be a conduit where the government gives us money and we just give the money to the universities, then I think my job would not have gone to donors, I would not have looked for money elsewhere. So the key responsibility is to source for funds, mobilize those funds, and finance universities sustainably. We also expected to advise the Cabinet Secretary in matters of university education financing, and that is why we are here. We are here to listen to you. So after this, we can be able to write to the CS and have a discussion and say, this is what we discussed in Pan-Africa, and this is how we think we should be able to move as an institution and as a sector on matters of university finance. Also, we are expected to develop a transparent, fair criteria for allocation of funds to the universities, and also establish the minimum unit costs for programs offered. I am told a story when Professor Mago appointed me. He told me that his predecessor, when they were now coming up with the DUC, who was Dr. Matiang'i, asked him that when he joined the ministry, he asked, how do you give funds to the universities? And no one could be able to answer. So he concluded it's witchcraft. And that is what Professor Kanyinga was alluding to. Before the DUC, it depended on how you could lobby, who you knew, how you knew them. I think that is what we have been wanting to discuss and see, that there must be a fair criteria where you know that if I have this number of students or these courses, this is how you can even calculate. You want to come forward and even be able, you calculate even before and know that this is what I'm expecting. Not to expect the ministry or UFB to give you the amount. You should be able to know that if I have got this number of students and the clusters are 14, then if I have got 10,000 students in medicine, this is the amount that is supposed to be paid for this course. I multiply and I know how much I'm supposed to get based on an actual criteria. Not that we sit in a boardroom and, for example, we shall give Rongo University 50 billion, we give Kenyatta University 5 billion, and no one can be able to explain that. That's just an example I'm giving. We want to be fair because these institutions are all ours, they are of national importance. We are also expected to establish a minimum, and I insist there, minimum discipline, differentiated remuneration for academic staff of universities, and then apportion funds to the universities, and finally exercise any other powers for the better performance of these functions. This is will be based mainly the powers from the CS, what he will be able to, he or she can be able to prescribe to the institution or the fund going forward. What is the current status? I've talked about the differentiated unit cost. In 2016, the government adopted the differentiated unit costs, a 12 cluster model based on estimated cost of running various programs. And the most expensive course is the Bachelor of Dentistry, which costs 720,000. The lowest is BA, which is costed at 144,000 per year. And that is what we use. We have the 14 clusters, and they are very clear. In this model, the government is cater for 80% of the unit cost, 80%. So if you are dentistry, you're supposed to get 80% from the government of the 720. The 20% by the household and institutions. Now that 20% is what help gives a student and what the household can be able to support. The 80% is what the government is supposed to provide. I'll be able to show how the government has been supporting this going forward from the beginning. And that is where it comes, and that is why you hear people saying that the DUC is not working, because what we know, like the last financial year, the government supported DUC at 53%. Therefore, there was already a deficit, not at 80% that is required. Therefore, you cannot be able to support these students. And that is only for public universities. For private universities, the support was at 22%. In fact, initially it was at 18%, and then they were given some little money by parliament, it came to 22%. Therefore, in the last financial year, each student, instead of being funded at 80%, they were funded at 53%. Hence the deficit that we have been having. For the private universities, they were funded at 22%. In fact, sometimes I wonder how the private universities keep on taking more students. Because even if we were to add the 3 billion that they have been given, even this year it will not add much to the public universities. So if the private universities keep on doing this, we keep on praying for them because they need prayers. Because the deficit and the gap is quite huge. Because if you can take a student at a cost of, this year I'm looking at figures of 20%, and still that student goes through university, then that is a huge challenge. So that is the status. And what do we look at? The current differentiated unit cost looks at the staff costs, staff student ratio, student numbers, cost of infrastructure and operation, the student load types. That is where you find that dentistry is ranked higher, and levels of the program. The DUC has enhanced transparency, accountability, and equity in funding the universities, though what we are funding is not at the required levels. Those are the numbers of funding, how we have been funding on average in public institutions. If you look at that, you'll see that in the year 2017-2018, the universities funded 263,100 students, an average of 126,616, and COOPS during that year placed an additional 69,151 students. The following year, that is 2018-2019, 233,218 students were funded at an average of 163,560,000. This is because if you realize the previous year, because of the Matiang effect, the numbers went down to 69,000. Therefore, the amount on average per student went up to 163,000. When you come to 2019-2022, there were 261,015 students funded, an average of 170,862. This is because there was an increment in the amount from 34 billion to about 42 billion by the government. And the placement during that year was 90,000 students, 377. The following year, that is last year, the last financial year, we were able to fund 271,446 students, but the average went down because the numbers remained the same, from 170,000 per student to 154,386. So you can see per student, the universities were able to lose 24,000. And hence you can see that is where we have a crisis, the universities. In just 1 year, the adjustment. Because the number of students who were admitted were 132,831. Now, this financial year, we are even in more crisis because the funds have remained the same. The average has now gone from the 53% I talked about last year to 49.1% per student this coming financial year. The deficit we have for only public universities is 27 billion Kenya shillings. So, vice chancellors who are here today, brace yourselves for a very difficult year. For private universities, and the average comes down from 154,000 to 135,000 per student. For private universities, the average is coming down from 22% to 20%, 20.6%, and we are paying an average of 40,366 shillings per student. That's why I was saying private universities need a lot of prayers. The deficit for them is 9.1 billion if you were to pay 80% of the DUC. Ladies and gentlemen, you can see the crisis that we are facing. No wonder our universities are actually closing. With this kind of crisis, we have written to the ministry, and for the first time they have actually agreed, and we have a letter that has gone to the CS, National Treasury. We are praying and we are camping there every day to see whether the first supplementary budget can be able to add you more money. And what I'm requesting here today, what I know, and it's a reality, money is given to people. If you know anyone at the National Treasury or anyone of national, please tell them that there is a crisis. You know, this is not, these are national institutions, and we need to work together. We need to put our hands together and say that UFB has written, and they are camping here every day. In fact, I've been told that we never knew UFB before. But there is a gentleman who is here in he has stepped in every office at Ministry of Education. He has stepped in every office at the National Treasury looking for money. The money I'm looking for is not mine personally. It is for the good of your institutions. Because I believe that these institutions and the children who are there are our children, and they should be able to be given the best education so that the lecturers who are there concentrate on their work. If there are no facilities, if they are not being paid on time, you can imagine if you do not receive money on time, the first thing you think of is doing your own business or going to do other things out there. So this is a serious national problem, which we should put our hands together and ensure that at least we are able to have this. I even dare say, why should we allocate 64 billion towards laptops to go to primary school. And so those are some of the interventions that we need to think about. If there is anyone who can be able to assist us with this very challenging situation, we are there. No. We are working together. Now, what are some of the issues that have gotten us where we have? I will not go deeper into them, but these are things that we need to discuss. There's the high cost of staff and personal requirements for the university. There's something called the CBA. I think this CBA, we need to really critically think about it, because if you keep on moving the way we are going with the current challenges, we may need to ask the unions to even think about how can they give the government a reprieve so that the universities recover. Because once CBAs are given, what is usually paid is the arrears. And then what remains is that the universities are supposed to continue paying their lecturers, but that money has not been added. And sometimes it is, even if it is added, it is not commensurate to the actual CBA that was signed for. So what do you leave? You leave universities in deficit, and at the end of the day, what they will do is pay your net salary and leave other issues like KRA pending. So this is a crisis that we must be able to deal with. It is not something that is to be taken for a joke. The other issue is poor data management in the university sector. For any decision making, we must have good data. We all must agree, and the vice chancellors and anyone from the university, we have got poor data management. We cannot sometimes even say how many students you have in a particular year. You cannot be able to say how many have moved from first year to second year. You are not accurate. When we ask for figures, even if you ask after 1 month, they differ. We need to critically think about this, and as the universities fund, we have gone ahead to see whether we can get funding to have a university management system where these numbers can be put together, and even you can be linked to it, and you can be able to get your numbers whenever you want to get those numbers from across the divide of the country. High expenses incurred by universities, student accommodation, is a real challenge because the electricity costs that are paid there are quite huge. Maintenance of some of these facilities are huge, and we need to think about them. There is no clear criteria on allocation of capital development grants. We were able to have a clear criteria for the other funds, that is the grants. But infrastructure to date, we don't have a clear criteria. You must be able to go and lobby so that you can know how much your university can be able to get. What we are saying is that we require a clear criteria. You rather even tell a university you will be funded for your project 5 years from today, instead of some university is funded more every day and they are putting up their facilities, and some universities have never been funded, and yet they are all our universities. I think when we get a clear criteria, then this will start moving forward. Unique challenges faced by each university. We need to look at some universities in very difficult areas, rural areas. Others have got security threats. So these are some of the things we need to see, and to refund them more. It's a discussion that we need to have. Funding consideration for special needs students, where there are universities that we should be able to encourage to have these students so that they are funded more. Financial consideration for institutionalized research, this has been discussed here. There are universities that are actually research universities and are centers of excellence. How can we motivate them? How can we ensure that they are given more funds so that they continue with the research and they are able to produce more research and postgraduate courses? In Europe, there are universities that are purely for postgraduate. I don't think there's a university in Kenya that is purely for postgraduate. Which one? And yes, and it's a private university. There is no public university that is purely postgraduate. And as a country, we need pure postgraduate universities, centers of excellence. That is very important because it is not about the numbers that we churn. We can churn as many numbers as possible. But if you do not have specialties, if you do not encourage postgraduate studies, then as a country we will not go far. There are gaps in funding of TVET courses in public universities. This we need to discuss and see how do we create or reduce that gap, because we don't fund TVET courses in public universities. There is a university funding framework. We shared this with all the universities. I hope that it was received. What we looked at, and this is still in draft, and we shall be having another forum to discuss it. Introduction of performance-based funding, promotion of centers of excellence. And this will be across board, both in private and public universities. We want to bring out centers of excellence where anyone in the country knows University A or B, be it private or public, is a center of excellence for a certain program or certain programs. That is the way the country should be able to move towards. Funding of students with special needs, I've talked about it. Funding of postgraduate programs is critical. Funding of research in universities. And most important, issuance of capital development projects with a criteria, not based on who you know and who you can be able to talk to, so that your projects move faster. The challenges, I've actually talked about this, so I will not repeat this. Let me move to the next issue. The future. What are we proposing? Number one, this is, I think, very critical. We are proposing that this country now needs to move towards performance-based funding, where we can have bounty systems, small rewards on top or normal enrollment. That could be one. These are proposals. Contract systems where the universities fund could set goals for institutions. You agree before you say you agree on certain goals for these institutions, who may lose funding when goals are met, or who may get more funding when these goals are met. The third one is envelope system. Government sets aside money in an envelope, and that is the one we are proposing. In fact, we have already written to a donor, a multilateral donor, who is willing to fund this. And we'll be asking some of your universities to participate. We are looking at about 7 universities, where the government sets aside funds. We are not going to use the kit given by government in an envelope for which all institutions can compete based on the limited number of indicators. Some of the indicators we are proposing are these. The rate of your 4-year graduation rate. How many students are you able to graduate and encourage them to graduate? The graduate employability rate. Are your graduates employers, or are we churning out graduates and they stay at home, or they are not marketable? So we need to look at how this can be able to come out. Research outputs, actual totals of doctoral, postgraduate graduates, the patents and licenses issued, research publication units for a specific year. D, the number of industrial attachments and internships facilitated with the industry by the university. Because you realize that if your university is marketable, then the industry takes your students for even internships and attachments. The number of joint programs with the industry, commerce, and civil society organizations in each year, because we are looking at across the industry. You look at industry, commerce, the civil society, female students enrolled in STEM. We are still thinking about whether, nowadays, the boy child, we may even think of putting the boy child instead of him, because the boy child now is suffering. So this we may change to male students, because the boy child is suffering more than the girl child. It is a conversation as a country that we need to have. Enrolled in STEM, persons with disability, we need to encourage them to go to the highest level of studies, that is PhD, postgraduate, all those disabilities, and students admitted with a disadvantaged socioeconomic background. There are students in this country, when a student scores a C+, it is the same as they have scored an A. Those are the students that we need to look at. If a student in a certain university got, even if it's a pass, that is a student who got a first class. Because of the conditions of the university, you look at the environment, even where they come from. Those are things that we need to look at. Trainings undertaken on financial management and governance for council, senior management, and senior faculty staff will also be a criteria. And these are not things that we thought about ourselves. This is research done by the World Bank. And in the year 2013, if you look at that graph, you see the percentage of firms in Kenya identifying an inadequately educated workforce as a major constraint. Look at food. We are talking about over 15% of their staff who come from the universities are inadequately educated. Textiles and garments, chemicals, plastics and rubber, other manufacturing, you can see above 10%, retail, these are now the majority, the normal business that we are going on. You're talking about over 35% of their workforce are not prepared for the job that they have been given. Other services, majority of what we do in across the economy, you are almost talking about 39%. If you have got 39% of your staff who are not adequately prepared, then as an employer, how are you operating? It means that ship that you are carrying, 40% of the people who you are carrying are doing nothing, or you are again training them afresh, if they have got the right attitude. Because again, there is an issue of somebody being trained and willing to be trained because they have the right attitude. So it is something that we need to have a discussion and see how do we bring in performance-based funding so that we encourage better educated workforce and who can come out to the industry better prepared for their challenges. The next issue, that is the future, is resource mobilization. We want to work with the universities to flag separate units, and these units should be able to articulate their mission and objectives to carry out revenue generating activities. These are already there in some universities, but they need to totally be separated from the universities. Then promoting measures for upholding academic responsibility and integrity in engaging entrepreneurial activities, providing a mechanism for establishment and management of enterprises within the universities, restructuring the existing business enterprises of the universities, if any, to full commercial basis with clear targets so that they are not within the university and they cannot be identified. Proper risk management of all commercial activities in the universities. Are they viable? Are they worthwhile? Or are they being carried along by the universities? Achieving limited liability status of universities-based business enterprises so that they are totally separated. Consultancies. We all know that the government gives about 40% made in Kenya, by Kenya, another 30% for AGPO, women and disability. Why can't we ensure that 30%, and this is a quick win, of all international and local consultancies are zeroed for the universities in these countries? That there are so many consultancies that are going on, either by government or through government. We just ensure 30% of that are ring-fenced for our universities. And that just needs to go to the national treasury and they play. Because for women and the youth, it has already been done. For Build Kenya, Make Kenya, it has already been done. There are so many consultancies, which Kenyan companies are paying millions of shillings and billions of shillings. If we say 30%, we should be ring-fenced to the universities, then we start generating funds from it. Open and distance learning, this needs to be encouraged based on what we have seen out of COVID, because it can be done successfully. You can learn a full program at your home and graduate fully. You see many Kenyans saying, I've done my master's with University of Sussex or Leicester. They have never stepped in the UK. They do it from here. And this person is paying thousands of pounds to be able to do that. Why don't we encourage this? With COVID, we have seen it and we are doing it normally, but why don't we have open and distance learning as a normal day-to-day activity for our university? Increase admission of foreign students. I think this is something that we need to tap into, because there was a time Uganda really tapped into that. Many Kenyans were going to Uganda for studies. Today, if you go to Strathmore University, many students there are from foreign countries. I don't know what Strathmore has done, but I know there's nothing. Those are Kenyans who are in Strathmore in management. We can also replicate as universities and get more students into our universities to get foreign exchange and to be able to get in more funds. Create linkages with county governments and the universities to develop innovation. This being an innovation forum, we need to work with the biggest beneficiaries of universities is county governments. I'll give you an example. Masinde Muliro University. If Masinde Muliro University was not there, Kakamega was dead. That is the truth. If Masinde Muliro University was not in Kakamega, because Kakamega is so close to Kisumu, you have no reason not to go to Kisumu if you needed anything. So the county government of Kakamega should be holding Masinde Muliro University and ensuring they work with them and facilitate them. Give them rebates in terms of even licenses, even if it's building PPPs. How does the county government support the local university so that they gain? There are many benefits that can come out of them. We need to use these county governments and see how we can be able to do this. The national government supporting universities in innovation creation that promotes national priority goals. We need to have a criteria so that people don't just shoot in the dark. Look at, for example, Vision 2030. What are the priority areas? Big four. Them. And then tell university, these are the areas we are looking at. Innovate for us. Because if you hold the information, then you do not give a chance to the industry or the universities to do research and innovate in these areas. Public-private partnerships, this is key for infrastructure projects. And we are saying that the funds that are currently allocated for infrastructure by the government should actually go to UFB. And then projects that are supposed to be developed in the universities, UFB and the universities and the National Treasury and the Ministry of Education sign an agreement. When the funds come, the university has no involvement. The UFB will just be paying the contractor for the agreement each year. Until so the chancellors and the university administration will not have the headache of ensuring that these projects are done. The government will have a guaranteed directly by providing the funds to the UFB to ensure that these funds, these projects are paid for after the PPP is completed. Lastly, we are also saying that we should have a sinking fund to support universities, because universities are not there to make money. They are there to disseminate knowledge, and for this, sometimes because the numbers may not be guaranteed and the research may not be guaranteed, there should be a fund set aside to ensure that they are supported at any given time. We talked about data, and here I've talked about performance data, because having data alone, which is not performing or which cannot be used, then that is not data you can rely on. We need to ensure that all the platforms and student records, management information systems, and communication routes are all digitized. We need to ensure that we have the correct data to make decisions. Submission of data should be timely. We should be able to submit the data which is correlated with the university finances. And we are also saying universities should have one deferment policy which is strictly complied with, so that when a student, when does a student defer, it needs to be very clear. For how long can you defer? Because we realize in all these universities, the policies are all different. We need to have a deferment policy. Lastly, commercialization of university innovations. There are two parts, we always say. Commercialization can lead to a new company. That is the startups that Dr. Karanja was talking about. Or you can still work with existing companies. Ask them, what does industry require? What are the challenges that they are facing? And how, as a university, can we come in to assist with those challenges? And in the process, you commercialize those innovations. If you look at the how much expenditure is used as a percentage of GDP in Kenya, you will see that Kenya is not doing very well. Though we are saying that we are almost similar to South Africa, we are at 0.7, Kenya is at 0.8. But if you look at the countries in that is in Europe, OECD, they are at 2.4, and you see the development levels here. Israel is at 4.3, Sweden 3.3, Australia 3.1, Singapore 2.2, and South Korea 4.2. If you look in Africa, you will see Nigeria is lagging way behind at 0.2. Ghana is at 0.4, followed by Ethiopia 0.6, South Africa 0.7, and then Kenya 0.8. However, if you listen to Professor Kanyinga, what he said, we were together with South Korea. They are now at 4.2. We are still at 0.8. What does that tell us? We have been left behind. And they will continue growing and leaving us behind. So we may be comparing ourselves with South Africa or with Nigeria, but are we really, should we be there with them? I think as a country, what we give, we should not be there. Lastly, as a summary, we need to develop institutional framework to foster innovation. Commercialization contributes to economic development. Prioritizing funding of research, which is very key. And that is why we have said the new funding formula, once approved, we'll have that. We need to ensure that we fund research. Universities to benefit from government-funded consultancies. I will continue emphasizing on that. And innovation hubs to be developed. So thank you very much. And thank you very much again.
Very much, Geoffrey Monari, for laying that foundation of some of the practical issues. You know, sometimes we look at you are a university board. Money and your job is to give us money. Sasa wewe mbona ongei vizuri? But now when we listen to you, then we unaona kumbe uko na shida. But the beauty of such a forum is so that we work together. You know, we hear each other, and then we understand where you're coming from, you understand where we're coming from, and then we see how we move together along this journey. So it's an opportunity to invite Professor Kanyinga and the CEO, Unari. If you're comfortable sitting where you are to answer the questions, that'll be fine, but otherwise you can come up front. Let's spend some 20 or so minutes, just hear each other out, and then we can find a way to wrap the day and define the way forward. Anyone wants to go? You address, of course, either of the two. So I can see one hand there. Anyone else want to go? Second hand here, third hand here. Okay, let's take those three.
Okay, thank you so much, Winston. I just have two comments for one is just a comment on your sentiment on consultancies. It's something that you need to pursue with a lot of vigorness. Oh, sorry. My name is Philip Rapul from the University of Eldoret. GBC in charge of planning, research, and extension. I am saying that on consultancies, that you need to pursue that with a lot of vigor, because we've seen a lot, for example, some of the consultancies being given to external people who come in and engage the Kenyan scientists to do everything. It really doesn't make sense. So both national consultancies and those will always give first priority to the university. I think I am happy with that kind of proposal. Now, something I want you to respond and maybe to, if you cannot respond, if anybody in the room has, is there something we can do as concerns the university research funds or funds for research? I am asking this from 2 points of view, particularly the issue of when it comes to waiver or the duty, waiver of duty and things like that for research infrastructure. Because sometimes researchers work very hard even to acquire some research infrastructure, but then coming home, the task with the duty is normally very high and it becomes difficult to fill those. Then interfering with research and innovation activities. And the second one is, you being in government, is there a way some provision or some exception can be made to public procurement of research infrastructure? Since we don't have money to pump in there, if that could be done, it could help a lot, because like most of the funds researchers get, if they have to buy equipment and they must do it through the public procurement, it is normally very much exaggerated. You can't get a desktop computer, for example, at maybe around 100,000 shillings. But when it gets to this procurement, that could be even 250,000. And yet, you are forced that you must go that way. And maybe the project only provided something less than that. And this is a practical experience that we've seen in several of them. Apart from that, some equipment are specific, some can only be got from outside, specific suppliers. But if at all this is expressly spelled out, it will reduce what the researchers have to go through to get to purchase this kind of equipment. And I think that can improve a lot, both the time spent in doing and also the time spent in coming up with our research outputs and also some of the innovations that are required. Particularly where postgraduate students are involved, you can get equipment and the student is supposed to have graduated, so a lot is not done at the right time. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Well captured. There was the second part.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. If you have the mic, you can go, and then she can go. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mnari, for that good presentation. My name is Dr. Simon from Technical University of Mombasa. I have two questions. The first one is that you say that money follows the student when you were talking about differential unit cost. Now, for younger universities, ours and others that have a very low population of students, they are still at campus universities. What is it to level out that kind of situation? Number two, you also, I think it's Professor Kanyari that said that why don't we consider, when we are funding, we also consider the postgraduate students, because this is where the knowledge starts. So in your organization or in the UFB, what is the plans for postgraduate students? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kenyinga. My classmate shared the same tutorial. That's true. I appreciate very much my classmate. I think having listened to Munana and Kenyinga, being very drastic and come up with since you said we work together, we should just be bold and just come up with recommendations, and we say what is short term. I listened to Professor Kibaki this morning, and also Professor Moi. The situation is very distressful, but I informate. So what is short is medium term and what is long term before even we talk about the future. And my short term strategy, which nobody likes, is what my classmate, Professor Kaminga, noted. How do we address the administrative university and academic university? If you look at the policy papers in this country, it states very clearly that administration should not be more than 30% to 70%. And the figures are there, the statistics is there. What is holding us from doing that? 70 to 30%. What is holding us from going ahead and also say, if we say research funding is 2% of operation budget, then library is 10% of operation budget. When we are now looking for funding, why can that be just put there? Research is 2%, library is 10%, and then we look from there. Then my other suggestion, I would say, the universities need casual laborers. Because this is where the problem is. And that is why Kaminga said that are we an employment bureau? Why can't we just implement and find some and the whole world, including the governor, need to be out and are even now in court? But yet, these casual laborers, the only thing they had is an ID. How can university employ people with only an ID money? If you statistics, if you want to work with some of us who are human beings, we give you very serious statistics. I've actually said that I can go to court and use and go to class and teach, but I cannot tolerate people with only an ID in university. This is what is eating the big universities. I'm sure that Professor Kibeke is scared to say so. But asked my recent people, including my own university, we get the true statistics and say how many casual laborers are there and what do they do besides just basking and gossiping. And then we just become very serious human beings. Short term, and then we go to long term. These are the proposals I'm giving if you want me to work with you, and I also have figures. I want permission for master education, everybody knows. I have these figures. My friend Philip Mayo will not tell what I want to say. I have told him every day. When they ask for private universities, private students, the Professor Mayo was working with me on a task force. And true or not true, it is true. And I told them that you will not sustain. I proposed to them what they don't like. Why can they be given less than 30% of students if they have to use the facilities that we have? 70% of the students go to public universities and then sit down and get up a good formula. When I even you know that the GUC has not worked. You know. Because if we are talking about 53%, the same as we need to review it. If it doesn't work, we come up with another formula that works. Otherwise, it's not going to. But my last comment is that the only difference is when everybody wants a university at some county level, that I think of it. But if you look at the concept of a university at every county, and you look at what Munari said, I come from Western Kenya, and before Masinde Muliro, Bungoma was doing better than Kakamega. But because of that university, it has also brought the resource distribution and even eliminating marginalization of some of those economies that had a lot of problems. So my last comment is that we can find niches. This is something that we are not looking at. We have universities with niches. And that's what the professor said, why even people just around Kabete ng'ombe, of course, as a student, we say kapete ng'ombe na kapete pesa. And then kapete ng'ombe is what will sustain the food security of this country. Niches in institutions, postgraduate training, health universities, education universities, arts universities, and then we have every country with a university. It's not bad. Access, relevant, and quality. That's my point.
So we'll do 2 more hands, and then let's see how the team reacts. Okay, we'll do 3 hands. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, Isaac Nyamongo from Cooperative University. And listening to Karuchi Kanyinga, it seems to me like he actually placed the problem right in this room. We are busy crying about funding. And the administrators who are here are all donating their top minds to Azimio. I think we have donated our top minds to bottom up. Those people that we have donated is actually talking about the plan of those people for universities. We are busy putting in a lot of plans in those political parties. Yet we are not talking about the challenges that the universities are facing. Now is talking about asking those people to come to our universities to tell us what plans they have for universities when they take over. Now asking them to tell us whether they will bail us out. We are busy talking about bailing out the sugarcane farmers. We are busy talking about bailing out the rice farmers. We are busy talking about bailing out the coffee farmers. What about universities? The mindset here that we seem to be, complaining that we're being left out, and I think maybe we need to have a rethink so that we can start addressing these things. Ask those people who want to lead us in the next 5 years what plans do they have for the university, and then we can come up and say, look, this is the person who has the right, attitude for the university education. This is the right person that we are, put people out there support presidential candidates based on plans that they have. And I think perhaps it's time for us as universities to also take a stand. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Odero, Vice Chancellor of the University of Science and Technology. I think the two professors who seem to be my age, I really appreciate it. We have problems, serious problems in the universities, actually a crisis. The other day, my staff went on picketing and got annoyed. I suspended all the union leaders. The next thing, all staff, 500 of them, walked out of the university and left me with the students. The reason is, one professor of the AMU, who is the vice chancellor, is not able to pay them. And I like what the professor there said, are universities for public good, or their personal properties that are owned by the vice chancellor? I think he said it very clearly that actually they are for public good. Public good, that means that our government must be ready to do the payment, to give the money for us to run them. I was in a team that developed the DUC, the differentiated unit cost, with my friend Professor Gold. And we said that if the cost is 100, then the 80% has to be given by the government, and the 20% has to be given by the household. And what Maria has told us this afternoon is that that 80%, which is the 100% money that the government is supposed to give, they're only giving the 50%. That is where the half-baked graduates that people talk about come from. I don't know whether you understand this, ladies and gentlemen. So you get me a very good student with an A, but you give me 50% of the cost that I'm supposed to use to pay to bring him up, to develop him. So it goes out as half-baked. What do we need to do? I told you, I really admire you. I don't know whether you're a preacher like me. You people who are in the policy, in the organization that deals directly with the financing, the research, the whatever, you need just the government when you are in the sitting table that we need this money. Yes, I agree with you. You can talk with the donors to get the money, but they should not run away from what they are supposed to do. And that's why, at that time, I'm a professor of mathematics. I was in one of these poor countries around Ethiopia, the other side. Professors get salary of 20,000. But everything, no, Kenyan shillings, everything that they do in that country is actually that country thing. They don't celebrate like Mysore. It looks good, isn't it? Even the shirt and the tie. It's not made from here. You get this. So we as Kenyans must start celebrating what we have and supporting ourselves. I was in JKUAT, those of you who don't know JKUAT, I was the BBC Academic Affairs. I went there when there had 300 students in the early 90s. By the time I was retiring, I think we had over 60,000 students. And I made sure that the ratio of the undergraduate and the postgraduate in the graduation was almost 30 to 70. Before there was none. But that was a deliberate attempt. But the problem again, Munari, for all those postgraduate programs that are developed in JKUAT, none of them was being sponsored by the government. And so, because we are talking about innovation, we are talking about research, I learned here 100%, just about 6 months, 3 months in Germany. But I realized my professor in Germany, we had a series of postgraduate students. There were masters, there were PhDs, and then there were postdoctorals. And there was support for each and every one of them. For us, really, is to strengthen what you are talking about so personally. And I admire you, my brother. Is that the police, the government need to put money really to go for postgraduate training, not only the masters, not only the PhD, but also postdoctoral. I would love to sit down in my mathematics office, really to think about what are the research issues, and we do them together with my postdoctoral students. But the postdoctoral students helped me to supervise the PhDs, and the PhD helped me to supervise the masters. Sometimes, because I also supervise undergraduate dissertation, the masters helped me to supervise that. But there is no funding from Monari. So going forward, Monari, please, this has to be taken very seriously. I think that's what I have. The others have been talked. I don't want to repeat. God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then I'll take Professor.
Thank you, Tony. I've listened and I remember in 2005 was sitting next to the former president Moody Award. I was curious, I asked him, who is government? Because you would even hear ministers complaining about. It is because I was the president at that time, chair our professional body, and there was audits of one of the team. They laughed and told me, you know, the government is anybody working in government offices who can sign the document. Remember, most of you actually in government what offices, you are signing documents. So you are a part and parcel of. So what we need to think about is why are we not doing things correctly? Policies are made by our counterparts in the government without our input. Then we suffer the consequence. And I agree with the Kanyinga that the civil service who are the part of our country are a reflection of what we input into when we train. Let me just look at what I said in the morning. It has been underscored. Most Kenyan universities are teaching universities. Well, now to accept. That's why the government only thinks funding based on what? Graduates. Then in this funding, that resource at 53% of differentiated unit cost. I'm glad to hear that Professor Demo was in the group that developed the DUC. I did the analysis with chairing a committee for the University of Nairobi. DUCs will not actually work optimally in the Kenyan environment because of the resources required. Now we write materials that we use. It is county pass. I'm not saying I told you so because I didn't tell you that time. But we did that for the University of Nairobi management. We want to make a presentation. I want to make this comments. Manali, you know, I know you and I'm not there that time, so it's not possible. 2017, two things happened at the same time. Then you can also see then why. Because nobody amongst us in the government, as I already said, thought about what the implication was. One, look at those of you from public institutions. When did your bills start escalating? 2017. The young factor came in and killed parallel program. People didn't realize that parallel program had died because it was going to be dragged over a period of 3 to 4 years. Then at the same time, thank you for showing us how you were funding. The government itself started doing what? Implementing DUC. And they cut funding to two things happening at the same time, reducing inflow of finances to the university. Without prior planning that if this happens, with a maintained level of expenditure, we are going to have problem. And that has been getting worse. Everybody's out there complaining. So the minimum we need, Munari, no, it's not your mistake. That we need the government wake up. I don't think that there are issues of politics. Public universities are what? Government. I've been told this morning, therefore, public good. So that our government coming, raise the issue of funding, universities to do public good, generating information, letting it, and releasing it to the market well educated laborers. Because the way we are right now, it is true, when we had so much money for HR meant as free. That's a fact. We gave employment, bill, and some of the contracts which was being given because of that actually permanent application. So for you to terminate them, you need to retrench. I think those of you who read about this area must have read when we requested give us 1.6 billion to retrench staff so that we are able to right size. That's a challenge. Government still needs to. They say they want to reform. You cannot reform if you are not ready to spend money. So the government needs to reform to help us come out of it. I just, I wasn't asking question, I was only making comments. Otherwise, thank you very much. I think we are on the same page that we are in trouble.
Yeah.
And we need to get ourselves out of this trouble by thinking.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we'll take those 6 questions and those comments and questions in between there. We'll use that to wrap. I've been in government for a few months. Let's call it a year. or maybe I was in government before. And I also went through that experience of meeting a minister one day, and then he asked me, why is the university not doing something? That time I was in university in Nairobi. Then I said, I don't know. Then he asked me, who is the university? Then I said, the vice chancellor. And they said, no, you are the university. You. Because you are tuned towards achieving what the university intended to. And to me, that was a major wake-up call. The way I later on pursued life in terms whenever I have different challenges. So in my last 1 year or so, I've gone through the entire cycle. One thing I try to do is to try and understand my environment and how it works. So in terms of government funding, budgets, we do them very religiously. Make these proposals. Amazing. And they look like this. We know these institutions need this and that and that. We have meetings and meetings. Budgeting an entire 1 year cycle. Go to Mombasa, present. You say everything you want to say. Unarudi Nairobi, unatumiwa text, unaambiwa mko hapa. Yeah, some people succeed and they get a little more, and that's okay. But by and large, it's not changing much. In fact, I see it coming down. Then I ask myself, so what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do? At least for me, and I made it clear by the team, let's explore as many avenues as possible. And it's bearing fruits. We're picking up and we are growing. And I think we will grow very well. I think the challenge might be now in the circumstances. What are we going to do? So now you and I were not there when these institutions were being created. Sasa unajua hii kitu ni sisi tunavaa kusukuma. Sasa kuja utuambie hilo unataka kusukuma. Just let's reacting to it. Yeah, you can go. You can respond to some, and then
Yes.
some, and then we will do vote of thanks and pray.
Okay. Thank you very much. Your comments, many have been comments, and I think we have taken those ones so that we can work on a paper that we will be able to present as resolutions. First, let me talk about the issue of consultancy. I want to promise, gentlemen, the DVC from University of Eldoret, that this is something we'll work on and put a presentation forward to the National Treasury. Because as I said, this is a quick win. These are some of the short-term things that can be done. And, we only need goodwill. On the issue of research fund, I don't think I will be the best person. Maybe Tony Tony, since he sits in the National Research Fund Board, may be able to lobby to see how exemptions can be given to equipment for research as they come in. The issue of universities with low numbers. As it is now, we have been giving support of 150,000 to 5 universities who have just been, and constituent colleges, once they come in, even without looking at the numbers. Because we give them 150,000 boost, which is then used as an amount to support them as they are putting in the proper infrastructure. So they are given support. We don't only look at the student numbers. When a new university is coming in, they are given an extra 150 million shillings by the fund to ensure that they have a soft landing as they start. It may not be much, but this is an amount that we usually give. Funding of postgraduate, we have said that this is work in progress. We need to seek extra funding for postgraduate because already the kit we have for undergraduate is not enough. We are funding students at 53%. We cannot again go and hide it so that it goes lower. But it is important, and I emphasized on it, that we need to have special funding for postgraduate students. It is something that we need to work on. It may not be done tomorrow, but I assure you that as the Universities Fund, we'll pick this up and be able to ensure it is done. On the issue of rationalizing staff to 30-70%, it's something that will require funding. Because as Professor Kibwage has also said, you need to put in money if you want to change these institutions. Many are bloated. We know of, I personally know, but I don't know whether it's the same one. I think I go. There's a university that has got 17% academic staff and 83% academic staff. So you really wonder what is happening there, whether it is an employment bureau or really. And if you want to reform this, then you must incentivize them. The other option, if there are no funds, because I also know some universities argue that we inherited this stuff, we inherited a technical training institution, and therefore we have taken them in, we cannot get rid of them, but they are not of use. So there's another way we can go around this. We have got many TVET institutions. Why not transfer this stuff there at the same terms, and then have them move there so that you give the universities a lighter wage bill? It is something that we need to think about as a country, because if you are not using them much, then transfer them to the technical institutions. Every day we said we are going to have one each for each constituency. And there are those big ones that actually require their skills at that level. I'm sure you can be able to take them to the national polytechnics from the universities, and they'll fit in with the same terms. And the wage bill will not have you do not have asked for money for rationalization. However, what you would have done is transfer the terms of service from the universities to the national government. So sometimes it's something that you just need to think and see how it can be done. You are given that option. If you don't want that option, then the next option of maybe rationalization can be done. But I'm sure many of them will be able to take that option. So it's something that as a government, and these are ideas that we need to bounce off the ministry and see how they can be supported. Madam, you talked about budget on research. I thought these were internal ones, which the universities can be able, maybe you are challenging your colleagues, they can be able to have budgets 3%, is it 2% to research, 3% library. So if they can be able to agree on this, then it can be done quite easily, internally. After you rationalize the staff so that you have staff that are lean. But don't worry, the issue of us having many staff is everywhere. I think it's a Kenyan thing. Because if you look at the counties, they were given a clean slate, many of them. But right now, 80% of the current expenditure in counties is the staff issues. So I think as a country, we need to think about, maybe we need to give the best incentives so that people are not encouraged to go for formal employment, but they're encouraged to go for informal employment so that they can be able to prosper. DUC not working. Those are good. The other day we circulated a document. We have not even finalized it. For us, I think we need to engage further. What it tells me is that we need to engage further so that we get the best formula which is acceptable across. I'm not saying that DUC is the best. Every formula can be improved. But what we need to do is to get a formula that is acceptable across and ensure that whatever we agree upon, it is transparent, fair, and equitable. Once we achieve that, then it will be okay. The worst will be if we sit in my office and I decide that today we shall give Mary University 10 billion. And because I don't like, maybe we were in the conference and Professor Kibwage talked something, I say, no, this year we give Egerton 2. I don't think that will be fair. We need a fair, so that everyone can be able to know what do you expect. And that formula will come from all of us. It is something that I assure you that we'll work on so that at the end of the day, we ensure that we have a formula that is acceptable across board. I think those are my comments for now. Prof, you can come.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I'll be very brief because quite a number of comments have been addressed. But let me begin by making a not very good comment. And that is about private universities getting money from public coffers. That competition between private and public universities is something that has got to be thought about. With due respect, I don't think we are doing the right thing to give private universities money from public universities simply because we are placing our students there. The private universities have got the opportunity because of their flexibility to become much more innovative and get what our students are getting outside of the country to go and do outside there. They can partner with other outside universities in Australia, UK, US, and everywhere, and offer something very innovative here and compete with them for that particular space. I know this is not very acceptable. I know my friend Mulinge must be, of course, he doesn't have a right to reply, but but I think some of us know how this began. And it will not be good for us to go public about how it began. Some of us know how parliamentary committees behave in this country. That's a story for another day. But private universities can actually become much more innovative and extend even into the region. There are so many parts of East Africa that value Kenyan universities. And this is the way to go. Private universities can offer different specialized courses that cannot be offered by public universities and get even more returns on the investment that way. If you look at the law of higher education in this country, nothing prevents someone from having a dual degree program. As we know at the University of Nairobi, we are generating more research projects at the University of Nairobi through dual degree programs. In some universities, it's called double degree programs. In the whole of Western Europe today, they are teaming up with their colleagues in Australia, in America, to offer dual, double, name it, different types of degrees. I don't see why the private university should be competing for something that is not even enough. They need to get out of the box. They have no right to rip. But on a more serious note, I think let's call a spade and say that budget making in this country is a political process. And I know I'm in the wrong forum to advise on what could be done. But I would actually make it a political process as well. I would politicize the problems we have. When Professor Nangulu was speaking, when she was young, she was more radical. In fact, we used to call her Chelgat Mutai. So I thought actually she was starting to say, let's close down the universities. and come back when the government is ready to fund the universities. I would politicize. I would say that the problem we have is a problem of policymakers not listening. I would design a political strategy for it. I know I'm in the wrong forum, but I would insist that from this forum you can say, let's have a roadmap of people trying to lobby politically, the people with ears to listen. And you begin by making lobbying a political process, because you cannot sit, he has said the way he moves from office to office going to lobby for money. For how long will this stop to start? We know very well that making budgets in any developing country is a political process. So it needs to begin by lobbying, and lobbying in a very forthright manner, and insist in one or the other. I'm sorry to say this, every manifesto of the party that is likely to win must have a section, a full section devoted to university funding, to research to the universities. The way they are profiling CBCs and these other primary kindergartens and without a mention on the universities, this must come to an end. But it can only come to an end if we insist that we must find to it that everyone is speaking about university education, because that's the future of Kenya. We are trying to invest on education for productivity and growth. And I can tell you in 10 years' time, we shall not be having quality manpower in this country if this particular trend continues. We are the last manpower, quality manpower for this country, trust me. Kiboge, we are the last time. Because we have started to scale down the investments that are required. If we are not having children who can read, if the reading culture in our universities has gone down, what else are we expecting? We need to start calling a spade and try to pronounce ourselves on these particular challenges. But even internally, please, even our own colleagues, our lecturers are not publishing. So we cannot compete for consultancies outside there. My friend from Elgin. We cannot compete effectively with our colleagues from out there because we are not visible. And unless we start talking about the visibility, and I dare say that our journals are not competitive because we don't have enough money. We don't have enough money to have a managing editor for a journal on full-time basis who is paid the salary of an associate professor. Just managing a journal. That's what is done in the West. For a journal to be competitive, it's a commitment. And my view is that if we can't beat them, we join them. Let's try to build the capacity of our scholars to publish in high-impact journals so that they are known there and we start competing for grants in the same manner they compete. And finally, is to say, Monari, you must find a fund to start incentivizing publishing. Those who publish in high-impact journals, give them 100,000 shillings for every article published. That's what is done in the West. That money will go to that individual and the department they belong to. The department will benefit. That person will mentor others. Let's try to think out of the box on how to get the money outside there. But partnership with outside institutions is also something else we may start leveraging on. There are so many institutions outside there who are keen to partner with us. But they cannot partner with us if we are not visible as individuals and as institutions. Those are some of the issues we may start thinking about. But of course, finally, is the whole question of postgraduate studies. This is not something that is going to wait for Monari. The way you said it's going to come tomorrow. I rather have graduate studies considered today than wait for it tomorrow, because we have actually skilled graduate teaching in this country. For scholarships that we give in every department in these countries. That offers more than 2 scholarships per year internally, and some without any. That's how bad it is. But this is the time we started profiling this in order to get out of the challenges that we have and move forward. Nangulu, I fully agree that universities in counties is not yet, but have we really planned for the manpower of these universities? You know the story, of course, where primary school teachers who have got masters are finishing teaching during the day and going in the evening to teach universities. It's not a shock, it's happening. Don't push me to the wall. Right. It is happening. And then, because these are people who don't do research and don't publish, they carry the notes they were taught with 12 years ago. I think we need to also start reflecting upon ourselves and do the right things right. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Every great thing comes to an end at some point. There are some questions that have been answered, and others looks like they became more questions. So we go thinking more and more about what we're going to do about it. But I think humanity has a way of surviving. Humanity has a way, and God is with us. So as long as we are going to charge our minds about how we're going to go through life and the future that we have just talked about, the threats that we see ahead of us, if we are true to ourselves, we will solve that, we will get solutions to our way forward. I'd like to invite two ladies who didn't speak much in the room. Professor Rosemary Mboku from Africa International University and Frida Maina from Congo. I think there's a reason why that's
Thank you very much. My name is Rosemary, as he has said. Let me remove my mask so that when we meet out there, you can be able to identify who I am when COVID is gone. I am a professor of education at Africa International University, and I am delighted to have been here to spend this day here. I have a lot of thinking to do. I didn't talk much because I was processing a lot, and I really want to give thanks to the organizers of this event. But before I mention specific groups and organizations, allow me please to differ a little bit with Professor Kanyinge, because you have heard I come from the private university sector, and I feel like what we have been talking about calls for us to work together as public and private universities, because we belong to the country called Kenya. There are many things that we can say. Actually, we can talk about why we think that public universities are advantaged financially, just like the way you feel like private universities are advantaged. But I can tell you, we have one common challenge, and that is policymakers who sometimes are not flexible. More than 50% of private universities began as theological institutions, and they were happy to remain in that domain. Mine began as a graduate theological institution. We were happy to be a graduate at graduate level. But since 1983, when we began, we tried to get a charter and we could not. We were told the biggest need is at the undergraduate level. Until we come to that domain, we were never to get a charter. So finally we succumbed, and in 2011, we got our charter and became a university. Something that happened, we got a mass exodus of our sponsors because they felt we had become a secular institution. And so, I mean, if we talk more, you will see that private universities are really struggling. And I feel like public universities have a lot of wealth of information in the area of research, because before we were not out there in the marketplace. Now we are forced to come and play on the same ground. And I feel like if we exchange our minds together, we can work and come up with multidisciplinary approaches, and it can be a win-win game. So thank you so much for allowing me to say that. I want to give thanks to Kenya for that wonderful workshop that you put together, and all the speakers that you put together. It has been very wonderful to sit and listen and to participate. I want to thank the University Funding Board, and we are praying for you that your proposals will get us more money. Thank you, Bill Bro, and the Thank you for what you do in supporting. We are going to figure out how to get those millions, not Kenya shillings, as you say. I want to thank Lemeson Foundation, Kemri, and universities for sponsoring all of us to be here, and even for those who had a chance to give talks, and also research institutions that sent their representatives here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frida. And finally, I will also invite Dr. Hay.
Thank you once again. Let me remove my mask. Dr. Frida Maina from Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization, the Assistant Director in charge of Technology Transfer. I was there 3 months ago, beginning September. So this is really exciting to be here. And I'm grateful to God for bringing us here, and to the government that is in here, that signs documents and sits in public office. So thank you for being here, for making this conversation very stimulating. Thank you to Kenya, to Lemelson Foundation, Vilgro, University for bringing us here, because I believe in the morning when it started, it felt a bit chaotic, right? And it felt like, is there a hope? But I think having this conversation helps us process things and see things. And I believe now what is happening is that things are sinking. We can see the way we can move. Someone said that momentum is a leader's best friend. When you have a stationary train or a train that is starting to move, a very small block of maybe 2 inches can stop that train. But when you have momentum, the train can just pass through. I mean, it will just break that block. And what we've been saying here, I think, are those small blocks. Now that we're gaining momentum, I believe we're going to move over those blocks and keep moving. Thank you to the people who've presented. There was someone from Strathmore, Cambridge shared their experience, University of Nairobi. And I believe there's so many other experiences that we would have had in here. But I believe that's a good start. And as we move on, there's something else that there's this picture that's usually, I can't remember what it's called, but it's someone who made a painting of a head with a face. The hair was on the face, huh? The long face, the long hair was on the face, and it's kind of presenting itself ahead. Huh? So the whole idea about the hair is that it's an opportunity. That when you see the opportunity, it's too late to prepare. If you can see the opportunity, it's too late to prepare. What Cambridge shared here, had already prepared, been wondering when will we make our 1 billion. But when the opportunity came, we were able to jump in. And for us, where we are right now, we might not see where it is that we are headed, but let's prepare. Let's prepare now, because when you can see the opportunity, it's too late to prepare. That time it's a lot of firefighting, it's a lot of trying to fit in, it's a lot of mistakes, but let's make the mistakes now, so that by the time we get there, we can move on well. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Let's meet in the Kenya Innovation Week next week. Thank you.
Finally, Professor Dr. Nrumpei, and if you really don't mind, you can pray. Is the Vice Chancellor of Scott University. Now, while Vice Chancellor comes up, after this, what we're basically going to do is there's plenty of tea which we factored in our day. And then I also promised to give something to commercialization champions. So here's the deal. If you are in leadership in your institution, which means you have some influence on the strategy, on the budget, on performance contract, and so on and so forth, I need one person from your institution to come and take. And tutapiga picha hapa nyuma. After tumeomba watu wengine wakinywa chai. Hapo ni sawa. So you just build consensus so that I have a representative from an institution, and I will tell you very soon what you're committing yourself to.
Thank you very much. This was a bit of a surprise. My name is Oleron K. I am the Vice Chancellor, Scott Christian University in Machakos. That's a new assignment for me. I just finished my term as chairman, Taita Taveta University Council. I've been in also 2 councils of private universities. So I have the breadth of both. So it's Dr. Karuti. Professor Karuti, I love you dearly, but I disagree with you. Right of reply. It I'm convinced about is probably that somebody is actually trying to pull back the carpet on private universities taking government-sponsored students. By continually going to lower that percentage, it will reach a point where it's no longer tenable. And I have only been in my assignment for 4 months, and trust me, Dr. Karuti, I was already thinking about saying I will not take any government students. I was contemplating that. I haven't made that decision, but I'm thinking of doing something rather radical on that one. But just to say thank you, instead of going to the institution, let me say thank you to all of you who are here today, who have taken the time as genuine, serious leaders of this country who are interested in the future of education in this country. It's not just the funding, it's the future of education. What is the quality? Which direction is it going? Which direction should it go? And what is our role making sure that it's going the right direction? So thank you to you all for taking time to be here to engage. And it's my hope, it's my prayer that going forward, as this is put together again and again, that one, you can do a bit of differentiation, that you have time only for vice chancellors, and then you have time for some functional positions that can sit in and be able to run very specific areas of the university instead of mixing it up, that you could differentiate and have 2 or 3 highly specialized areas that focuses on education in this country and what it takes for those leaders to make those decisions and go forward. Thank you very much. Thank you all of you for doing this and continue doing it for the sake of this country and the generations to come. Thank you and God bless. I didn't hear the prayer part. Thank you. Okay, let's pray then together. We can all stand. You've been sitting for a whole time. Almighty God, we come before you this afternoon. We thank you for the opportunities you have given each and every one of us who is in this room, and particularly the leadership roles that you have given each one of us to provide leadership to the younger generations, to the people that are going to come before us. May we take that role seriously, and may we impart the type of knowledge, the type of character that is desirable and that will transform these our countries for years to come. And this I pray in Jesus' name. Thank you.
Enjoy a cup of tea as I hand over powers to some people. I invited Vice Chancellor to talk to them. Something very nice. Yes. I know. Yeah.
No, but when you differentiate, on their leadership, they know they must, and then sometimes just bring the experts, those research guys.
Yeah, it's just that not all Vice Chancellors end up coming.
Oh, you either give me the thing or I'm leaving it.
No. Where are you going?
Because
I'm just calling my team.
I'm dashing somewhere.
Yeah?
I'm dashing.
You are running away.
Yeah.
Take off Bio. But I know how to get you there.
Thank you.
Yes.
I need to run. I have another meeting.
You need to take your things before you make it very prestigious.
Okay, then we wait.
Yeah.